The morning started like a whisper, the kind that slides into the kitchen before the sun decides to show up. I stood by the counter with my hands around a warm mug, letting the steam brush the tip of my nose as if it could calm the little knot forming in my chest. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you tilt your head and listen twice. David sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, giving me that half-present version of himself I'd seen more and more lately. It wasn't anything dramatic, just off. And when something's off, my intuition never lets me ignore it. Then the front door opened, carrying in a breeze and Lena's cheerful voice. She walked in smiling like she'd rehearsed it in the car, all polished and sweet, her ponytail perfectly tight, her steps perfectly light. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," she beamed, placing her bag down as if she belonged there. I answered with a polite, "Morning," but inside, I was observing every tiny detail. The early arrival, the too bright tone, the way she looked around as if checking whether everything was exactly where she left it. Women notice these things. We're built that way. What caught me completely off guard wasn't Lena. It was David. The sudden warmth in his voice, the way he stood up a little too quickly, sounding surprisingly cheerful for an hour he usually hated. "Of course it's okay," he told her, with a softness he never used before 9 a.m. I felt the hairs on my arms rise, not from fear, but from recognition. That tone didn't belong in our kitchen, not directed at her. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just let the moment settle in my bones. And right there, something small shifted, just enough for me to realize my morning routine wasn't mine anymore. Later that week, the pattern repeated itself, quietly, almost politely, as if trying not to alarm me. David walked into the kitchen with that casual tone men use when they want their lies to sound like everyday conversation. "I think I'll work from home tomorrow," he said, pouring himself coffee he didn't even drink. I didn't react. I didn't raise an eyebrow. I just noted the day, the exact same day Lena would be here again. And you know me, I don't believe in coincidences that show up twice wearing the same clothes. When Lena arrived the next morning, she greeted me with her usual bright smile, but I caught something behind it. Nervousness, maybe, or guilt trying to sit still. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture too practiced to be innocent. "You're early," I told her, keeping my tone warm, like honey covering something sharp. "Oh, I had extra time," she said, glancing quickly toward the hallway where David was pretending to look busy. And that glance? It wasn't the kind you give someone's husband. It was the kind you give someone who already knows you're coming. I felt something shift inside me, like a curtain being pulled back slowly, letting just enough light in to reveal the outline of the truth. I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet. I was awakened. That's the best word I can use. I smiled softly, the kind of smile a woman wears when she's already 3 steps ahead. And as I watched the two of them pretend not to notice each other, I said something under my breath, just for me. Once is coincidence, twice is routine. And when a routine starts forming behind your back, you learn to stop trusting the front. As the morning moved on, I watched him hover in places he never cared about before. David lingered near the living room doorway, pretending to check emails while Lena organized Emma's toys. I caught the way his shoulders relaxed around her, the way his voice softened as he said something I couldn't quite hear. But I didn't need to hear it. I could feel it. You know that sensation, right? When your stomach tightens before your mind can even form the thought. That's intuition stepping forward, arms crossed, waiting for you to catch up. I noticed things that would seem insignificant to anyone else. The way Lena tucked her foot behind her ankle when he spoke, the shy tilt of her chin, the shared glances that lasted half a second too long, little puzzle pieces dropping into place, one by one. And honestly, I didn't feel anger. Not then. What I felt was clarity, a strange, quiet kind of clarity that made everything in the room sharpen. The colors, the shapes, the tension sitting between them like a secret neither had the courage to hide well. When noon came, I kissed Emma goodbye and grabbed my keys, acting as if it was just another ordinary day. But inside, something had awakened in me, something steady, watchful, fiercely calm. I walked out the door with a soft smile, the kind that hides strategy behind sweetness. Because here's the thing, betrayal doesn't start with fireworks. It starts with a whisper, a shift, a repeated coincidence. And as I drove away, I felt it, like a quiet drumbeat beneath my ribs. The story wasn't unfolding in front of me anymore. I was already walking into the next chapter. I came home earlier than planned that day, the kind of early that catches a house off guard. The moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. A delicate, expensive perfume hanging in the air like a guest who hadn't asked permission to stay. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even close to mine. I stood still for a second, letting the scent settle around me, almost inviting it to confess. And then I saw it. A coffee mug on the counter, lipstick on the rim. Bold, red, unapologetic. And here's the thing, Lena didn't wear lipstick. I ran my fingers over the ceramic mug, tracing the curve where someone else's mouth had been just hours before. It's funny how a tiny stain can feel louder than a scream. David was in the living room typing away, pretending to be swamped with work. I walked in casually, my heart steady but alert, like a spotlight sweeping through a dark room. "How was work today, honey?" I asked, leaning against the doorway as if the question meant nothing. He didn't look up. "Busy," he said. "You know, calls, emails." "Right. Calls, emails, and apparently kisses on mugs." I smiled at him, a slow, warm smile, the kind that makes a liar relax because he thinks you're still blind. "You work so hard," I told him, stepping closer. "I'm proud of you." He smirked, actually smirked, like he'd gotten away with something clever. I tucked that expression into the vault of things I'd use later. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing I knew. Instead, I let the truth sit quietly between us while a plan began taking shape behind my ribs. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the dim glow of the living room lamp with my laptop on my knees. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. I was calm in a way that almost scared me, like something inside me had finally clicked into place. I searched for small security cameras, the discreet ones meant for parents watching babysitters or checking in on pets. Funny how they market these things as peace of mind. They don't mention the kind of truth they can uncover. The kind that changes everything. I walked through the house slowly, choosing the perfect spots. One near the playroom, angled just right so it caught the doorway without being obvious. Another tucked high in the kitchen, hidden among the plants I kept forgetting to water. And the last one in the hallway, disguised inside the vent cover David never bothered to fix. I took my time, lining them up, checking the light, testing the view. It didn't feel sneaky. It felt necessary, like setting up mirrors so lies couldn't hide their reflection anymore. When the cameras were finally in place, I sat on the couch, staring at the tiny thumbnail previews glowing on my screen. They looked harmless, just empty rooms waiting for life to happen inside them. But my heart tightened, because I already knew what I'd find. Women don't need proof to feel the truth. We just need it to be undeniable. As the footage began recording, I whispered to myself, "Let's see what you do when you think I'm not looking." And with that, I stepped into a role I never asked for, but was suddenly built to play. The next evening, after Emma fell asleep cuddling her stuffed rabbit, I slipped into the kitchen with my laptop and pressed play. At first, it was nothing. Lena folding tiny shirts, humming softly, moving like someone who wanted to look harmless. But then David walked into the frame. He didn't see the camera, of course. He walked right up behind her, close enough that their shadows touched. And when he leaned down, whispering something in her ear, I watched her shoulders shake with quiet laughter. That sound hit harder than any confession could. My chest tightened, but not in the way people imagine when they talk about heartbreak. This wasn't heartbreak, it was confirmation, cold, clean, precise, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not flinching, just absorbing. I studied every movement, every stolen glance, Every little smile they probably thought no one would ever see. It's wild how betrayal doesn't need volume. Sometimes it speaks loudest in whispers, touches, and half smiles. I paused the video at the exact moment Lena looked up at him with that shy, guilty expression. My finger hovered over the trackpad, steady as a heartbeat. "Got you," I whispered to the dim kitchen air, to the cold cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink, to the woman I used to be before this moment. And oddly, I felt stronger. Not broken, not fragile. Strong. Because once the truth stands in front of you, looking you dead in the eye, the fear disappears. What replaces it is something sharper, something determined, something ready for the next move. The next morning, I woke up with a strange stillness inside me, like the kind that comes right before a storm decides whether it will break. I moved through the house the way I always did. Coffee brewing, Emma babbling in her high chair, the soft clink of dishes, but everything felt sharper, clearer. I watched David carefully, the way you watch a stranger trying to pretend he belongs in your home. He kissed the top of Emma's head, avoiding my eyes like they were too bright. That's when I knew he sensed it. Something in me had changed. When Lena arrived, I greeted her with the warmest smile I could wrap around my words. "You're so good with Emma," I told her, letting my voice soften in a way that made her shoulders stiffen just slightly. She looked startled, caught off guard by kindness she didn't know what to do with. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins," she said, her smile tight at the edges. And behind her, I watched David watching us, his jaw tense, his eyes darting between us like he was waiting for something he couldn't name. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. It hung there, thick and deliberate, like a curtain waiting to drop. He cleared his throat, searching for something to say, but I stayed quiet, letting the weight of the unspoken settle in the room. The funny thing is, deception makes people squirm long before the truth comes out. They feel it first, like heat rising under their collar. And as I walked away to pack Emma's lunch, I could feel it too. The shift, the dread, the slow motion unraveling that neither of them could hide from anymore. That night, I made dinner the way I used to when things were good. Soft lighting, slow music, the kind of atmosphere that used to bring us closer instead of revealing how far apart we'd drifted. I lit a few candles, letting their glow warm the room, masking the chill that had settled between us. David sat across from me, tapping his fork against his plate, his leg bouncing under the table like he couldn't contain the tension anymore. I watched him closely, savoring every flicker of discomfort. It was strange, almost empowering, seeing guilt move through a person like a shadow. We talked casually, work updates, Emma's drawings, plans for the week, but every word he spoke sounded rehearsed, like he was reading from a script he didn't quite believe in anymore. I let him talk. I nodded at the right times. I even laughed once, just enough to lull him into thinking I was still soft, still trusting. But inside, I was tracing the edges of the truth like a blade, reminding myself why I needed this moment of calm. Sometimes, before you drop the bomb, you let the room get nice and quiet. You let the liar relax. And then I leaned back in my chair and said it, lightly, gently, almost sweetly. I was thinking, we should take Emma to my mom's this weekend. His fork froze mid-air, suspended like a secret caught between breaths. Yeah? Why? He asked, his voice tightening around the edges. I gave him a small smile, one he couldn't read no matter how hard he tried. So the house can finally be empty, I said softly. You seem to like it that way. The silence that followed wasn't quiet at all. It was loud, heavy, and full of everything he wished I didn't know. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, fork still suspended, shoulders tight, eyes darting like a man trying to find an escape route that didn't exist. I watched every second of it, the way his breath hitched, the way his lips parted as if the truth might slip out by accident. It was almost fascinating, seeing the realization dawn on him that the ground beneath his feet wasn't solid anymore. He swallowed hard, his throat moving like he was forcing down something bitter. And I just sat there, calm as you please, letting the silence tell him exactly who held the power now. He finally set the fork down, the metal clinking against the plate like a tiny alarm bell. Mia. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. I tilted my head, studying him the way you study a piece of art you've seen 1,000 times but suddenly notice a crack in. Exactly what it sounds like, I said softly. No accusation, no anger, just truth wrapped in velvet. His eyes narrowed, searching my face for clues, for softness, for a lifeline. He found nothing but calm, and that terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. When I stood to clear the table, he watched me with a tension I could practically feel against my skin. He opened his mouth like he wanted to explain, to confess, to rewrite the story before it left his hands completely. But I didn't give him that moment. I took my time gathering the plates, rinsing them under warm water, humming softly like a woman at peace. Because here's the thing. The calm before a storm isn't really calm. It's preparation. And as I wiped my hands on a towel and turned off the kitchen light, I felt it rising inside me. Steady. Inevitable. The beginning of the end. Saturday morning arrived dressed in quiet. The kind of quiet that feels planned, like the world is holding its breath for what comes next. I loaded Emma into her car seat, kissed her warm forehead, and told her we were going to Grandma's. She giggled, kicking her little feet, unaware that I had no intention of driving anywhere beyond the end of our street. After pulling away from the driveway, I looped around the corner and parked beneath an old oak tree, its branches stretched wide like a guardian watching over me. From there, I had the perfect view of my own front door. I sat in the car with my phone in my hand, the camera app open and ready, my pulse steady as if I'd practiced this 100 times. It's strange how betrayal can sharpen your senses instead of breaking you. Every sound felt heightened, the rustle of leaves, a distant dog barking, the low hum of the neighborhood waking up. I watched the minutes tick by, each one carrying a mix of dread and determination. But underneath it all, I felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. Pure, unshakable purpose. Almost 2 hours later, David's car rolled into the driveway. He stepped out casually, stretching like a man settling into a weekend he thought he controlled. A few minutes passed, and then an Uber pulled up. Lena stepped out carrying a small overnight bag she tried, and failed, to hide behind her. She smoothed down her hair, glanced around nervously, then walked straight toward my front door. And the moment David opened it for her, smiling like a teenager sneaking someone in, something in me hardened, not from pain this time, but from final, crystal-clear resolve. I hit record the moment Lena stepped inside, my hand steady as if holding that phone was second nature. Through the windshield, I watched them move through the living room, laughing, talking, slipping into a rhythm that came far too easily for two people who should have been nothing more than employer and employee. I zoomed in, capturing their faces clearly, letting the camera do what my heart no longer needed to. There was no trembling, no second-guessing. Just truth unfolding right in front of me, framed perfectly in the glass of my own home. David reached for her bag, brushing her hand with the kind of softness he hadn't offered me in years. She smiled back, that shy, guilty smile I'd seen on the footage before, but now it was real time. Undeniable. Unforgivable. They moved to the couch, too close, too comfortable, as if they'd rehearsed this moment. Watching them didn't hurt the way you might think. It didn't unravel me. If anything, it stitched something stronger inside me, a line between who I'd been and who I was becoming. I wasn't losing anything. I was waking up. Minutes passed like slow, deliberate breaths as I captured every angle, every careless touch, every intimate shift of body language. And in that stillness, sitting alone in my car, documenting the betrayal happening behind my own front door, I felt something I never expected. Control. Pure, grounded control. They thought the house was empty. They thought I was gone. They thought they were safe. And there was something poetic, almost cinematic, about watching them from the outside, knowing I held the final edit of this story. When I finally stepped out of the car, it felt like my body moved before my thoughts caught up. I walked toward the house with a calmness that didn't belong to the moment, the kind that settles over you when you've already accepted the truth. My hand didn't shake as I turned the key. I didn't pause at the threshold. I just walked in, letting the sound of the door slamming behind me slice through their laughter like a clean cut. David shot up from the couch, eyes wide, face pale, the color draining from him faster than he could process the disaster unfolding in real time. "Mia!" he choked out, as if my presence were the wrong part of the equation. I looked at him first, not with fury, but with something far more unsettling for a man who thought he could get away with this: composure. Lena scrambled to her feet, clutching her bag to her chest like a shield. "Mrs. Collins, I can explain," she stuttered, her voice trembling. I held up a hand, quieting her instantly. "Save it," I said, my tone soft but sharp enough to leave a mark. "I didn't come for excuses. I came to pick up something I forgot." David took a step toward me, reaching out like he still had the right to touch the air around me. "Mia, wait, let me explain," he started, but I cut across him with the kind of calm that could freeze water. "No need," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and tapping the screen. The paused footage glowed between us, his hands on Lena, her smile upturned toward him. Their truth, captured perfectly. "I have everything on video," I told him, watching the panic flash across his face. "HR will see it, and your mother. You can keep the nanny, David. She's the only one who'll still stand next to you after this." I dropped the house keys onto the counter, the metal clatter ringing through the room like the first note of a new beginning, and then I turned toward the door, already stepping into the next chapter of my life. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful, like the world had finally stopped pretending for my sake. I didn't cry, not once. Instead, I moved through each morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, packing Emma's lunch, answering work emails, sipping my coffee without the taste of doubt lingering on my tongue. And while David kept calling, leaving messages full of apologies he should have offered long before the lies began, I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I was done. There's a difference. When the video circulated through his company's internal chat, it happened faster than I expected. A colleague accidentally forwarded it, and from there it spread like wildfire. Quiet, undeniable, devastating. David lost his job within a week. HR didn't even blink. Meanwhile, Lena disappeared from town entirely, as if erasing herself would rewrite what she'd done. But the strangest part? I didn't feel vindicated. I felt released. Like someone had cut a rope that had been pulling at my ribs for years without me noticing. I sold the house soon after, packed up what mattered, donated what didn't, and moved Emma and me into a smaller, warmer apartment where sunlight hit the windows just right in the morning. Starting over wasn't glamorous or dramatic. It was steady, like rebuilding a muscle you forgot you had. I opened a small business, something I'd always dreamed of but kept putting off while supporting someone who never supported me back. And each day, as I watched Emma explore our new space with wonder, I felt myself growing too. Not away from the past, but beyond it. One afternoon, as I organized inventory for my new business, Emma tugged at my sleeve with her wide, honest eyes. "Mommy, do we miss Daddy?" she asked, her voice soft, innocent, untouched by the weight of adult choices. I knelt beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear, feeling the truth rise in my chest like a gentle tide. "No, sweetie," I told her, my voice steady and warm. "We miss who he pretended to be." She nodded, accepting my words without confusion, and hugged me tight, one of those small, powerful gestures that remind you why you keep going. Every day, the apartment felt more like home. The walls carried laughter instead of tension. The rooms held possibility instead of secrets. I decorated slowly, plants that finally stayed alive, soft blankets, warm colors, little pieces of myself I'd forgotten. I'd catch my reflection sometimes and barely recognize the woman staring back, lighter, clearer, almost glowing. Healing isn't loud. It's not a dramatic transformation. It happens in the quiet moments. Morning light on your face, your child's hand in yours, a breath that doesn't hurt anymore. And the more my life opened up, the more I realized how small my world had been with him. How much space betrayal takes up when you let it. Now, that space was mine again, wide, steady, full of potential. I'd built something new, something real, and it wasn't shaped by his choices anymore. It was shaped by mine. And as I tucked Emma into bed each night, watching her drift into dreams without fear, I felt it rising in me, a confidence, a softness, a strength that had always been there. I was just finally stepping into it. By the end of that first month, I realized something I never expected. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living, truly living. I woke up without the knot in my chest, without the constant scanning of my own home for shifts, signals, warnings. Life became simple again, in a way that felt luxurious. Morning pancakes with Emma, long walks to the park, evenings spent reading instead of wondering. Every routine that had once felt heavy now felt like a small freedom I'd earned, one quiet moment at a time. David tried reaching out once more, an email this time, pages long, drenched in regret and promises he should have made years earlier. I read it only once, letting the words pass through me like wind through an open window. No anger, no longing, just closure. I didn't respond. Some chapters don't deserve an epilogue. Some people don't deserve a seat in your new life. And the more distance I gained, the more I understood that letting go wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-respect. What surprised me most was how light my heart felt the day I packed away the last remnant of our old life, a sweater he'd left behind, tucked at the back of a drawer. I held it for a moment, not in sadness, but in gratitude for the lesson. Then I folded it, placed it in a donation box, and exhaled. A deep, steady breath that tasted like freedom. And as I carried the box to the hallway, hearing Emma giggle in the next room, I felt the future waiting for me. Wide, bright, and nothing like the life I'd walked away from. Months later, I found myself standing in the courtyard of Emma's new school, surrounded by parents making small talk, while children raced in circles around us. The sun felt warm on my shoulders, a gentle reminder that life can shine again in places that once felt dark. I wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but I caught my reflection in a classroom window and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked radiant, relaxed, certain. It wasn't the glow of someone who moved on. It was the glow of someone who moved up. When the event ended, I held Emma's hand and walked toward the parking lot, laughing as she told me about a drawing she'd made in class, a house with 2 windows and a big sun in the corner. That's when I saw him. David. Standing near the gate, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped as if the weight of the past had finally settled where it belonged. On him. He looked smaller somehow, tired, unshaven, nothing like the man who once walked through life with undeserved confidence. For a moment, he just stared, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one he'd betrayed. "You look good," he said finally, his voice low, almost fragile. I offered a calm smile, the polite kind you give someone who no longer has access to your world. "I am good," I replied, letting the truth sit between us without bitterness. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "I made mistakes, Mia." I held his gaze, my expression soft but firm. "You didn't make a mistake, David. You made a choice." His eyes dropped, defeated. I squeezed Emma's hand gently. And so did I. Then I turned away, walking toward the car with the ease of someone who had nothing left to carry. As we walked to the car, I felt something powerful settle inside me. Not triumph, not vindication, but freedom. The kind that wraps around your ribs like fresh air after years of breathing in smoke. Emma swung our joined hands with that carefree rhythm only children have, humming a tune she made up on the spot. I watched her from the corner of my eye, realizing she wasn't just growing up. She was growing into a world I'd chosen for her. One built on truth, stability, and peace. A world I'd fought silently, fiercely, to reclaim. When we reached the car, I opened the door for her and paused for a moment, letting the scene around me sink in. Parents loading backpacks, teachers waving goodbye, kids shouting each other's names. It was all so ordinary, beautifully, deliciously ordinary. A few months earlier, ordinary had felt impossible, like something forever out of reach. But now, it felt like victory. Not loud, Not dramatic, just quietly earned, the kind of victory you feel in your bones, in every breath that doesn't sting anymore. As I buckled Emma into her seat, she looked at me with her wide, trusting eyes. "Mommy, can we get ice cream?" she asked, hopeful and bright. I smiled, brushing a crumb from her cheek. "Of course we can," I said, closing the door gently. And as I walked around to the driver's side, keys in hand, I felt it. This soft, steady certainty that the road ahead belonged to me. Not because life handed it to me, but because I took it back, piece by piece, choice by choice, until it fit in my hands again,